As far back as I can remember, I've always wanted to talk about Goodfellas. Welcome back, listeners, to another exciting adventure here on Matt Goes to the Movies. As you may have guessed by the difference in voice, we are back in the Matt Goes to the Movies extended podcast universe, also known as the MGTTM EPU for short, which is not at all shorter, I realize. But we're calling this show Rob's Reviews. It's our second time doing the show, so for those of you who checked out Fight Club, we're really glad that you did, and we're glad that you came back. My name is Rob Greaves, and I want to welcome listeners to the show who may have never actually checked out Matt Goes to the Movies before, and I would encourage you to subscribe to it. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you're going to find a wide range of episodes. It's going to help you pass the time on your commute, doing errands, or just completing random side quests around the house. Matt and I just finished up reviewing Loki on Disney Plus, and we're definitely looking forward to everything new from the MCU. Please be sure to interact with the show. There's a variety of social media pages that Matt has set up for Matt Goes to the Movies. So search for it on Facebook, Instagram, and he's even on TikTok. So make sure you look for the show there. Leave your comments under the show. You can also, like I said, you can email the show directly, mgttmpodcast@gmail.com. Basically, just the first initial of Matt Goes to the Movies, podcast@gmail.com. You can also check out podchaser.com. It's kind of like the IMDb of podcasts. You've got an opportunity to leave reviews of individual shows as well as individual episodes, as well as shows as a whole that you really like. So please make sure you check it out there. We're here today to talk about a movie I've seen more times than I can count, and I rank it as one of my all-time favorites. This film has had a lasting impact on me through its many wild and incredibly quotable moments. I'm talking about Goodfellas. It released in 1990, starring Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Lorraine Bracco, and Paul Sorvino. It was directed by the legendary Martin Scorsese and features a screenplay co-written by Scorsese and Nicholas Pileggi, who is the author of the 1986 book Wise Guy. The film is based on following Henry Hill's life associated with the Lucchese crime family. The film was originally supposed to share the name of the book that it is based on, but was changed to avoid confusion with other films or television shows that were also called Wise Guy. This film received 6 Academy Award nominations, including one for Best Picture that it ultimately lost to Driving Miss Daisy, Best Director, which went to Oliver Stone for Born on the 4th of July, Best Supporting Actor to Joe Pesci, which he did win, Best Supporting Actress for Lorraine Bracco, Adapted Screenplay, which once again lost to Driving Miss Daisy, and it was also nominated for film editing. Now, I've seen Driving Miss Daisy a grand total of 1 time, and I'm not going to comment on the quality of that film here and now, but I'm fairly positive that nowhere on planet Earth right now, or probably ever, is anyone recording or listening to a podcast about Driving Miss Daisy. I remember one line from it. It's Morgan Freeman telling her, "I'm driving you to the Stowe." That's all I got for you on Driving Miss Daisy. Basically, what I'm trying to tell you is it doesn't have the long-term impact on our culture like Goodfellas. Goodfellas holds a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes and is frequently found in lists compiling the greatest films of all time. You can currently stream it on HBO Max, as well as an introduction to the film by Scorsese himself, which I definitely recommend checking out. This film brings back a lot of memories for me from the many times I've seen it. So I invited someone to break it all down with me who shared a lot of those same memories. Someone I do a lot of favors for. So when I need someone to help me out here, when I'm trying to bang out a show on Goodfellas, there's only one person I can ask. So I got my brother on the line here. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Hey, glad to be back.
So we're going to stay spoiler free for a little bit. Just in case anybody is kind of curious about what this film is all about. They've certainly heard of it before. It's hard to think that anybody has never even heard of Goodfellas. We're going to stay spoiler free for just a little bit and let anybody who's listening now kind of decide for themselves if they want to see it or not. Eric, what has Goodfellas meant to you? What does this film represent for you?
It's just one of those benchmarks, I guess. You know, it's the standard that you compare all other mob flicks to anything organized crime, it's going to be, the debate is, does it hold a candle to Goodfellas? That's it.
That is it. This is routinely, I want to say Roger Ebert has a quote that he calls it the greatest mob movie of all time. And it's hard to disagree with that. Certainly, there's a lot of people who feel like Godfather Part 2 is up there. There's a lot of mob movies out there. There's a lot of mob fiction, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But certainly this one is kind of the one that all other films of this genre are measured against. So we're going to move into a segment called Teaser Trailer. And this is where we're going to talk about the film spoiler-free. Eric, I want you to start. Why should someone watch this film if they've never seen it? What would you tell a person who's listening right now trying to decide if they should check this film out on HBO Max or buy it on DVD, Blu-ray, however they watch movies? What would you tell someone to entice them to watch this movie?
Well, the Cliff Notes version, I guess, just looking at the cover of my DVD, the little kind of byline underneath the title says 3 decades of life in the mafia. And if you know anything about mob and mafia cliches, 3 decades is a long time to be in that game. So at a minimum, that's impressive, right? You don't really know too many old gangsters for the most part. So it really, and if you know nothing else, the cast, they're really bringing it. Ray Liotta, De Niro, Pesci. That's, what else can you say besides these 3 guys are starring in a movie about the mafia? Without giving spoilers.
What else do you really need at that point? Yeah.
That's the trump card.
It's De Niro at his De Niroist, right?
Yeah, it's a young De Niro too. Like I forgot how young he looked in the first part of the movie that when they first introduced him. So it's kind of cool to see that for sure. Yeah.
So for me to talk about this a little bit, if I was to try to entice somebody who's never seen it, first of all, you need to know there's definitely some intense violence here. There's some unsettling things that are going to happen, but it's some of the most amazing storytelling I've seen on film. It's some of the most incredible quotes, the incredible moments, phenomenal actors who are kind of operating at the height of their powers. It's not really just the outlaw fantasy. It shows all of the aspects of it. It shows the rise, and it also shows where these guys pretend to be family. And certainly when we got a chance to talk about the Fast Saga over on the Basement Binge, we talked a lot about that word family. These guys say they're family. They behave like family until it's not convenient anymore. And it's just such a fascinating story. And to think that this is real. These are real people. These events actually all happened. And very rarely do you get a true story that's this fascinating and this compelling. I mean, Eric, when you start thinking about films that you love that are based on a true story, how many can you think of that you enjoy more than Goodfellas? Like, I don't really have anything right off the top of my head where I'm like, oh yeah, that one, based on a true story was great. Maybe like Cinderella Man jumps off the top of my head, but outside of that, I mean, what else can you think of that is
the
really
Blair Witch Project? Because that was real, right?
It was shot that way, yeah.
It was real bad. I would say there's really not many, but to also just throw in another little, boost to this, they didn't really do a ton of embellishing. No. In fact, they had to withhold a lot of stuff if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, and we're going to cover some of that in a little bit, so make sure you stay tuned for that. To think that this is a story this compelling and interesting that grips you from the opening scene. The very opening scene really sets the tone for what the hell am I about to watch if you've never seen this before. So, Eric, go ahead and tell the story of the first time you watched this movie. So how old were you? And at this point, we're going to just go ahead and assume the statute of limitations for our mom to get mad at our dad for showing you this movie when you were way too young to have seen it. We're going to assume that's expired at this point. Like, we're both adults now with families and careers and stuff like that. Like, it didn't impact us that negatively. So the statute of limitations on him being yelled at for that is way up. So go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about your first experience with Goodfellas.
Well, I want to start off by saying, if for some reason, Mom, you're listening to this, just turn it off. Don't skip ahead. Just turn it off. So this movie comes out in 90. I am 5 years old at that point. Didn't watch it at age 5. If nothing else, take a little bit of relief in knowing that my dad wasn't putting this on for a 5-year-old. But I'm pretty confident that I was still in elementary school. If I wasn't in 5th grade, it was maybe 6th. Okay. So, and there's a little bit of backstory here too. I don't know when he had seen it, but whatever it was, he saw it, and we were hunting for this movie at Blowout Video at the Grove City outlet malls. They were sort of a new thing back then. So we're looking for this movie. He finds it on VHS and can't believe it. Like, oh my God, I've been looking for this movie, found it. Boom. So we go to watch it, and of course there's a very strict don't tell your mother. It was very explicit. There was no implying anything. It was straight up don't tell your mom. So
I feel like a lot of good stories start off with don't tell your mom.
Yeah. So we watch half of it ish. I mean, maybe slightly more than half, but didn't get to see the whole thing. And it was probably related to the whole, mom can't find out, she came home, whatever it was. So I only got to see the first, half in one day, go to bed thinking, this is great. This is awesome. Who wouldn't want to live this life? And then, watching the next half of it, sincerely changes your perspective on what life in the mafia is truly about. Makes you question everything you saw in the first, hour plus. So, it was quite a shock.
And
there's a lot that I shouldn't have been exposed to, probably. But just
you turned out okay though, right? Mostly
somewhat mature, outlook. My behavior certainly wasn't, but my mind was mature. And so I understood it. I mean, there were definitely some things, and we'll get into it later too when we're not doing spoilers. But there were definitely some things that I watch it now, and I still remember how I felt the very first time. And, again, we said this a lot in talking about stuff in Fight Club, but it is really, that's what really good art is in talking about the art of film. It really does, if it's great, it does take you back every single time you watch it again or experience it again. You're always going to have a special place in your memory with the first time. And if it does take you back to that, then they did something right.
Well, 100%. And you think about some of the scenes, you think about, and we're going to start crossing over into spoiler territory here. So if you have not seen Goodfellas and you're thinking you want to go check it out before you listen to the rest of this episode, this is where I'll encourage you to go ahead, hit that pause button on your phone and come back to us. We'll wait. We'll be more than happy to chat with you again after you've seen it, because trust me, this is a film that I feel like anybody who loves movies needs to have seen. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and move into spoiler territory now. And when you think about, just the zaniness of this movie, and part of the reason we do this show, Rob's Reviews, part of the reason I wanted to do this show was to really get into some of the movies that have had this long-lasting impact on me, certainly you as well, Eric. And you're thinking about just the movies that just pop into your mind. And I would say you and I can probably only have a conversation with each other for about an hour tops before a Goodfellas reference will come up. And if it's you, me with our dad involved, it's maybe 30 minutes before a Goodfellas reference comes up. And those are the movies that are special. Those are the movies that actually really mean something to you and are going to have, like you had said, it's the kind of thing that crosses over from just entertainment into art, and really will be one of those things that will be regarded as an excellent example of what this medium can be. I'm not going to call it the Mona Lisa of filmmaking or anything like that. That's kind of tough. but it's certainly one that I think holds up
one
and
of
is entertaining
Scorsese's
from start to finish.
masterpieces. If you're
Yes,
looking at his
absolutely.
his work only, his body of work, apples to apples, this is very near the top of that pyramid, if not on top.
And that's
I
a
mean,
guy with a
it's
body
probably
of
debatable.
work that is enviable. Like how many other directors have his resume? Like you can say Spielberg for sure has a resume, like, but it's like, can we say Scorsese's up there? With some of one of the best resumes in all of Hollywood
when
of
you're
films
an
he's made.
actor and your phone rings and it's Martin Scorsese, you don't say no. Like regardless, I don't care if he's shooting a mouthwash commercial. You're gonna say, yeah, sign me up.
You're there. Yeah,
can I volunteer my time?
So I think, yeah, you're just on set to say that you worked with that guy. So I'll tell you one of the things that was really interesting to me thinking about doing an episode on Goodfellas, and one of the things that it struck me is how our culture and pop culture in general is so full of stories and content in general about pirates, gangsters, cowboys robbing trains and things like that. It really feels like we're obsessed with outlaw culture. And yet these guys, Eric, you said it earlier, these guys don't live long, happy lives. Like Blackbeard didn't just retire. Like
no.
There's not a lot of pirates that actually got to live off of what they robbed and stole. Like these guys either die on the job or they get taken out by a competitor. They get taken out by their own people. They just don't make it. They get taken out by the army, the law, like whoever it is. And yet we have this romanticized fascination with outlaws. Eric, why do you suppose that is? What draws people to stories of gangsters and pirates and cowboys?
I think as far as I'm going to call it, I've been exposed to a lot, but sitting here without doing any real research on it, I'm going to point to the Wild West. Think about stories from, Billy the Kid and, the outlaw Josie Wales and just anything about that. You're talking about, spaghetti westerns and young kids reading these stories, thinking about that type of freedom, because that's really what it is. It's the freedom to do whatever you want, and nobody makes up rules for your life. You abide by a different code. It's your own code, or it's the code of your little posse or crew, and that's your life. That's your world. Everybody else just happens to be living in it, or maybe they're in your way. And I think it's that freedom is the fantasy, where you're not living by the rules. That's it.
And it's funny because you can really draw a lot of parallels between the golden age of piracy and I guess kind of the, that 50s, 60s, 70s era, mafia culture as well. And then certainly to what we saw in the Wild West, there's so much of that, and Henry even talks about that in Goodfellas, the freedom to do whatever they wanted to do and nobody could touch them and all this other stuff. And they instilled fear in people. It's very much to what we saw, in the high times of piracy in the Caribbean. It just really drew some interesting parallels to me. And I say that while I am, simultaneously talking about Goodfellas. I have Red Dead Redemption 2 currently sitting in my PlayStation that I haven't finished yet. And I'm also trying to get finished with Black Sails, which is a phenomenal pirate show that was on Stars. It's now on Hulu. You can check that out. I'm actually watching and consuming all of this at the same time. So it's just really funny to me that we're talking about this, that this just kind of occurred to me. And I realized I'm doing all this at once.
Well, and it's also sort of a meta reference, but when they introduce De Niro as Jimmy Conway, Ray Liotta's character Henry is talking about him and, talking about how he just loved the steel, but he says he's the type of guy who rooted for bad guys in movies. So like you're sitting here watching this and these are all bad guys, they don't have any redeeming qualities. I mean, even the stuff that they talk about, your family, blah, 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 they don't care about each other like that. So, and you'll learn this later, but it is kind of cool. Like you're sitting here watching, these are bad guys. And he's talking about this dude rooted for bad guys in movies. That's the kind of dude he was.
Yeah. So we're going to go ahead and move into the next segment, which is called Book to Big Screen. I mentioned it earlier, and we did this with our Fight Club review as well. We talked about some of the major differences between Chuck Palahniuk's novel and what we saw on film in Fight Club. Well, Wise Guys is an actual true telling that Henry Hill and his wife Karen, to a large extent, actually narrates to the author of the book, who then contributed to the screenplay. And I'll tell you what, I'd been meaning to read this book for a very long time, ever since I really fell in love with this movie. It was one of those things like, I'll get around to it, I'll get around to it, I'll get around to it. And Matt had really been bugging me about when we were going to get the next EPU episode out, and I just decided last week, bang, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I want to kind of have the opportunity to have read this book, so I bought it on Google Play. I was able to mostly read it on a tablet, and then I could pick up on my phone in between. And I'll tell you, I found this book very hard to put down. I mean, it's as compelling as the movie is, the book is very, very similar. I mean, you just want to keep seeing what happens, because this story is crazy. Like, it's just wild what goes on and what happens, and you really want to see what kind of goes next. So I definitely recommend it to anybody who is a fan of this movie, and likely if you've downloaded this, if you've listened to this episode so far, there's a good chance you're a big fan of Goodfellas. You're the kind of person who would really enjoy the book. I think what you'll find is that it fleshes out so many more things. And a lot of things, like I read the book before I did my rewatch recently, and I don't feel like it really necessarily added anything to my enjoyment of the film. I just feel like I have a fuller picture of everything that's going on. So I want to, Eric, I'm going to run a couple of these by you and tell me what you think, as far as if it's better to have worked the way it did or not in the film. But some of the big differences, really, at the beginning of their story between Henry and Karen, they are much younger than what we've seen at the time. Karen does briefly make a reference to the fact that Henry was 21 at the time, but Ray Liotta was 35 when they filmed this movie. So
he doesn't look 21
they do
at any point. I don't think he does.
No, they do a decent job of de-aging him and then making him look older the more coked out he gets. But so I think they do a great job with De Niro, by the way, making him look younger and older, and his actual age at different points. Henry would have been 21 at the time of this. So you kind of lose a little bit. She was 19, when they first met. Like, they got married very early. Like, I want to say they'd been seeing each other for like 4 months before they eloped. So you kind of lose a little bit of that. And that's kind of tough to write around. You really can't do much more than what they did with it. Henry actually spent time in the military. So he starts at the cab stand, graduates high school, and decides he's going to go into the military. The movie completely skips over it. And I think that's fine. Like, I don't think it really adds anything to it. I don't really know that going down that path would have added anything to the story. But what's interesting about that is he goes into the military and he's still running schemes. He's still hustling. He's still doing numbers. What he would do is he would get any extra food and supplies that he could get, because the Army had tons of waste, extra stuff that they just ordered that was just going to get thrown away. And he found ways to sell it and move it here, move it there, sell it off. He loan sharked guys. He sold tax-free cigarettes. I mean, he was a gangster through and through, even in the military. The book also goes a lot more into how interlaced organized crime and organized labor really are. Now, you can imagine in Hollywood, where everybody on that film set is part of a union, why they may not necessarily want to make unions look bad, but it was much more interlaced, and it was part of how he was able to get parole at different times, was by getting a union card that Paulie kind of forced up. So you kind of skip over that in the film a little bit. There's also some consolidation of characters. So Jimmy and Tommy get substituted in a lot in the movie. At different points, like it's Paul Jr. Instead of Tommy. Or it's Tootie, who is featured in the movie, but not to a great extent. Like, he's a very minor character. So the movie substitutes Jimmy and Tommy in a lot more, which, Eric, I think that probably makes for a little bit better story. Like, would this have been as good if it wasn't those three guys? Like, if they introduce a lot more guys into the mix?
Well, no, and this is pretty common practice in, retellings of things, for the sake of film. you do a lot of character consolidation. So, I think that it makes sense because the sort of the real, one of the major pillars of this movie is that these guys were like a little crew and they stuck together and it was all them, and so if it had been just random guys in the mix, with all the major stuff, it kind of wouldn't have been the same. I think it would have been less.
Yeah, I think it was a good change. Certain last names get changed to kind of not necessarily protect the innocent, because these guys are far from innocent, but just for a variety of legal reasons. So Jimmy Conway is actually Jimmy Burke. Paul Cicero is actually Paul Vario. And Tommy DeVito is actually Tommy DeSimone. So those are the real names that got changed from the book to the movie. Like you said, legal reasons. Billy Batts, one of the great scenes of this movie. In the film, he insults Tommy and then he gets whacked that night. In reality, in the book, what happens is Billy Batts, he still insults Tommy, very similar to what we saw in the film. But then weeks later is when Tommy finally gets him. And I'll tell you, and Eric, I want to hear your thoughts on this. To me, this shows the character as a true psychopath, as opposed to just a rage-filled just killer who, the moment you piss him off, he's just set on go. He's a junkyard dog that's just going to go for the jugular the moment you piss him off. By having, in reality, him waiting all that time means he had time to think about the fact that he was about to whack a made guy, and there was going to be problems for him. There's going to be problems for his crew as a result of it. That's a true psychopath. What do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's more entertaining for it to be the crime of passion, if you can call it that. In the film, that provided the most entertainment because there wasn't the premeditation. Had there been some of that, he might have. Well, maybe Tommy wouldn't have, but they would have talked him out of it. Like, this is a made guy, you can't do this. So the fact that it was a matter of, an hour or two in the movie kind of allows for what occurred to make sense and be entertaining. If we're talking weeks in the real history of it, that is somebody who is calculating and who wants to get away with it. That is, and probably has zero remorse whatsoever. And
none.
That's it. That's his character.
It actually, as hard as this is to imagine, I actually feel like in general, the movie tones down the true psychotic nature of Jimmy and Tommy. Like, I actually think the movie makes them look more docile than they actually were in the book. If you can imagine that.
That would be, I guess I'm going to have to read the book now because
you need to. Yeah. That's hard to think about.
Yeah.
Lufthansa. It's a big part of the film, the big heist, the money heist. It was actually a lot more complicated than what we saw in the film. No big deal. You don't necessarily have to give us all the details just for brevity of storytelling. These guys weren't that sneaky, though. Within hours of the heist happening in real life, the FBI already knew everybody involved. Like, they knew who did it. They even knew how they did it. They knew the whole thing. And while technically the crime is still regarded as unsolved, everybody who was involved in it is now dead. And they knew immediately who it was. So these guys just, they were portrayed in the film as being, pretty good at what they do. They got rolled on immediately. There was a ton of people who knew way too much. So they really didn't get away with it.
Like Baby Town Frolics, like it was, he just listed like the whole heist. Like, he just broke it down. Like, Frenchie was in charge of this and, Stax was in charge of that. And everybody had their role. And, all he had to do was keep everybody away from the phones. And it's like, well, that sounds easy, but at the same time, like, if you ever watched a heist movie, I'm a heist guy, I love it. That's not always the easiest thing to do. And they're just talking about it like it was completely no big deal. And again, kind of a bummer that you don't really actually get to see it happen. Like, and you don't really even get to see any planning. He just sort of says, this is the plan. This was what they were going to do. And then, bloop, oh, it happened. And that kind of speaks to what this this is not a heist movie. This is more. It's about the result, not the process. The result for them is money.
It's being told through Henry's vantage point, which is also how the book is written primarily. Through,
right, he had no
Henry's
involvement except for just giving the tip. He gave Jimmy the tip. That was it. That was why he didn't get whacked.
Yeah, he was really just the facilitator. By the way, there's actually a whole book written about just this heist, and I want to say there's some documentary stuff out there too that I was looking into. If you're more interested in that, if you really want to know more about it. The book also has some more details on Henry's time in prison, which is a lot. It's very interesting. Just the different ways that Karen would sneak in. Like, he actually worked on a farm for a little bit of time because that made it easier for Karen to sneak stuff in and out to him. There was times that he was able to get religious releases. So he was pretty much home for almost an entire year before he was actually released, with the amount of time he was able to get out of prison. Like, these guys work the system unbelievably. So it's really interesting there. There is just the briefest of mention of Boston College and point shaving that Maury says. Just, it's one line in passing. But it is actually a fairly major point in the book. Henry facilitated a Boston College point shaving scheme that actually has its own 30 for 30, narrated by Ray Liotta. So that's definitely worth checking out if you're into this. And here's one that's going to just
bringing it full circle, isn't it? That's great.
It is, yeah. This one's going to stop you in your tracks. There's a period of time where Karen's so busy, not able to keep up with housework. Henry meets a Haitian guy who is able to facilitate the purchasing of a Haitian slave that they smuggle from Haiti through Canada, bring to the United States to do their housework. It's not a very big point in the book because apparently the woman they brought in was well over 6 feet tall and scared the kids. So they kind of like got her out of there pretty quickly. But there was a period in time where Henry Hill had a slave. And that's kind of weird to think about, considering that this took place by this point, it's the 60s. Like, how is this even happening? But yeah, that was like I had to reread that whole section like twice. I was like, what am I reading here?
In the movie, I don't know, real life connection, but the Lufthansa thing was like 1975.
Yeah.
So you're like, you're talking about, early to mid 70s and there's an actual, and it's not an indentured servant. This isn't actually like an enslaved person.
Oh no. Yeah, definitely slave. Yeah. And I'm not talking like human trafficking where they're like sex slaves and things like that. I'm talking like, no, this was actually a person who was kidnapped from where she lived by her family and brought to the United States to do the guy's housework for him for no money. Like, it's about as messed up as you can imagine.
But that's also like a very Henry Hill thing. If you, as you get to know him as a human being, that's like, he probably
he's a scumbag.
Set that up. Through his prison, like he did all this from prison. Unbelievable.
Yeah. So there's that. We're going to move on. In the movie, Henry gets caught with coke. It was actually heroin in real life. I would say overall, the film pretty much just tells Henry's story with some of Karen's perspective. There's a lot more details of the world and the circumstances in the book. Again, I really recommend it for anybody who's checking it out. One of the things that's a change in the film when Ray gets out, or when Henry gets out of prison and he goes to Polly, and Polly gives him money and says, "Now I got to turn my back on you." It's actually Karen that goes to him. He gives her the cash and says that he has to turn his back on Henry. And Karen remarks that when she sees Polly turn away, she can see that the man is crying because of what this now means. So it's kind of an interesting detail there. I think it works better with Henry in that scene.
Another interesting fact. First of all, this dude's just got this giant wad of cash in his pocket, like
at all times while he's cooking sausage.
Yeah, he's just got his spatula. He's just rolling the links around. But this was 1980 in the film. $3,200 adjusted for inflation in 2021 cash is like 11 grand.
Yeah,
and he just has that in his pocket, and he just gives it away and says, "Now I got to turn my back on you." Like this. Well, this person, and for perspective, Polly's biggest thing was you can't mess around with that crap. He is on parole. And if he gets caught associating with degenerate drug dealing scumbag criminals, he will go back to prison for the rest of his life. He will die because he's an old man, and he doesn't want that. So that's why he's really so pissed about the drug dealing, and he's the one who could be most affected by all of this nonsense, and he still, instead of just having him killed, because he could have easily done that, gives him 11 grand in today's money and says, now I got to turn my back on you. And that's the end of it as far as he's concerned. It's not really the end of it, which you find out later, but holy crap.
Yeah. Some of the details you get in the book that kind of the movie touches on briefly. Henry has a line about, a guy went away just for saying hi to somebody. Part of the reason why the mafia bosses didn't want any of their crew dealing with drugs is just being associated with somebody involved in drugs was going to be enough to get you indicted, and then you go away for a long time. And they didn't have as much control with that part of the court system the way they did with some of the racketeering and loan sharking and some of the other stuff that they were doing all the time.
With the federal stuff. I mean, it's almost everything with drugs is going to cross state lines, which makes it automatically federal. And then you've got the racketeering stuff, with RICO, like that. You couldn't play around with that if you're a boss. That's putting everything at risk just to mess around with for some easy, stupid.
Yeah, in the film, they kind of present it more like it's a moral stance that Pauly had on dealing junk, but as he calls it. But it really wasn't necessarily as much of a moral stance. Trust me, these were bad dudes. Like they didn't really care. Pauly is he's portrayed in this movie as somewhat of he kind of seems like your grandfather, maybe a little tough at times. Tough love, but very patriarchal. You're right. Yeah. But he was a bad dude. One of the other interesting details, so the version of the book that I read was actually like the 25th anniversary of it. And Pileggi has some other notes in there. Obviously, his work had been turned into Goodfellas, which is now this massive film. And something I found interesting was that Ray Liotta was actually the one who convinced Henry Hill to get himself into drug and alcohol treatment in 2006 when his life was continuing to spiral out of control. And I just kind of thought that was, where else would you really see anything like that, where the actor who portrays you as a character is somehow responsible for helping you try to get your life back on track? Like that to me is just kind of, that's a wild moment. So, Eric, any of those things that I mentioned that were changed, or kind of omitted or altered, any of those things you think would have made the movie better if they would have left it the way they did from the book? Because I got to say, I don't really think any of this really needed to make it out of the book. I mean, I loved reading about it, and I loved knowing more of the backstory or having that world just fleshed out a little bit fuller. But I don't know that any of this needed to make it into the movie unless there was something you grabbed.
No, I mean, how can you ever really know? Because, maybe Scorsese's vision would have made something, just as cool or maybe cooler, but we won't know because it didn't happen. But I think for the most part, it's, it's pretty easy to sit there and just, say like it's good how it is. And I think, though, nothing really jumped out at me from your list of, some of the major key points that were different, especially the Army thing, him being in the military, for that to have made any sense in the film whatsoever. You're looking at a very minimum of like 20 to 30 or more minutes that would have needed to be devoted to that, just to make it not such a throwaway part of the movie, because if they would have included it as a snippet, it would have been like, why the hell are you even talking about this? It's dumb. It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
He, at no point does he seem like a military guy. I mean, it really starts off with him talking about doing whatever he wants. And that just is the polar opposite of somebody who joins the military, because that is strictly doing exactly what everybody else wants, not what you want. Like
it's the definition of it.
You don't get to make any choices. Like if the Army wanted you to have free will, they would have issued it to you. So like that's not part of this movie at all. And I think that was absolutely the correct move, to not even devote any time, because it would have been time wasted. It would have been not fruitful.
Yeah. Overall, I think if you choose to read the book, you're going to find that there's a lot of, especially if you've seen the movie a million times, like Eric and I have, you're going to see things or quotes in the book that you can hear in Lorraine Bracco's voice, that you can hear in Ray Liotta's voice. Like you will hear lines because there were direct quotes taken and adapted right into, especially the narration. The dialogue, not as much, but the narration for sure, you'll see that. So I'm going to move into our next segment, which are some behind the scenes details. And with a film like this, there's just so much that you can look into with, especially with real world characters. And I'll tell you something I didn't know until I was researching this. When we get to, I don't know, we're past 3/4 of the way into the movie at this point, and they're talking about entering the witness protection program. The guy that is kind of their handler and having the conversation with them about what witness protection looks like is a character by the name of Edward McDonald, who is played by Edward McDonald, the the real life guy, played himself in the film when he found out that it was being made, because he had been interviewed for the book, of course. And when he found out that the film was being made, they kind of had him on as a consultant. He made it known, look, if you're ever looking for somebody to play me, I'd be willing to do it. And if you rewatch this movie knowing that he actually had this conversation with the real Karen and Henry Hill, it just makes it that much more interesting to kind of see that
really
happen.
Cool when I rewatched it, because you had mentioned this, when we were doing our prep, and you told me that. I had that in my head I was waiting, for the whole, because that really happens at the very end of the movie. It's within the last like 10 minutes of the whole movie is when that's happening, and it is kind of cool. And to be honest, he really does play himself really well. I mean, I don't know the dude, but like it's he sounds exactly like a Fed would sound, because he knows the people he's talking to are scummy, nasty. Like, you don't want to be doing them any favors, but if you have to take a loss, it is to let this scumbag and his not angel of a wife go off and suffer no penalty other than they got to live like normal people, which is a huge penalty for them, by the way. But they can get away with everything and just live like regular folk, so you can take down the big fish. It's that whole let the small fish go to catch a big fish. And the way that he's talking to them, he's not coddling them. They aren't some innocent witness to a crime. They are main players in all of the crimes, and he just so happens that he wants to flip. And so he's not talking to them like you would expect. It's not like a provider / customer relationship. It's very much you do this or you don't do it. If you don't, you die. It doesn't matter if you beat your case or if you go to jail, you're dead. Or you can cooperate with us and we'll make sure that you stay alive. Those are the only options. And he does that very authentically. I love it.
When you know that that's actually him, that scene does hit a little different. I agree with you on that. I'll tell you what's interesting is, so a lot of that scene was actually improvised. And when you start doing some more research on this movie, you find out that a lot of the dialogue was actually improvised. They recorded a lot of kind of rehearsals and things like that. They took a lot of the dialogue that worked, and then they actually wrote that into the script that they eventually used. But still, much of this film is improvised. And when you go back and you think about how much this works, it's because there are high-level actors that working with a high-level director that are just allowed to have some freedom and play with it, and they're trusted to portray these characters, and it works. What were you going to say?
Well, yeah. So they clearly did their own homework. You know what I mean? Like each actor obviously has some form of natural ability to just be great at what they do. But certainly there has to be some amount of research that goes into being able to, play these parts and be believable and play off each other, which I think is really, really great. I don't really know how much history any of them had together in film prior to. I wish I would have looked that up, but it seems like they've done several, projects together. But I will throw out,
Ray had never worked with either of those guys before.
You may not be prepared for this, but I pulled out my own little behind the scenes Easter egg snippet, and I'm sure you'll understand exactly what it is, and be like, yeah, that makes sense. So according to IMDb, which is great resource for film, the F word and all derivatives of the F word 321 times in the movie used at an average of 2.04 times per minute. Joe Pesci says around half of those. And the script originally called for exactly 70. Okay, so
Yeah.
You're looking at like 4.5 times the amount of F-bombs that the script called for. And that, I think, is a very clear indicator that there was a ton of improv. But this movie is known in F-bomb circles to be one of the top per capita type F-bombs per minute type of thing. It's significant. I mean, twice per minute is it's quite impressive.
That's a lot.
It doesn't sound. It never really sounds gratuitous, to be honest. I mean, they really. It's pretty organic. It is natural. You think about these are criminals. These are scumbags. These are people who have murdered people and felt nothing, and murdered somebody and then went to breakfast. So it doesn't really seem like they would be all that different than what you're seeing on television. It's or in the movie. It's very. They're all just very cavalier about everything. So what would their language matter to anyone else?
It's interesting you mentioned just how natural the language feels in this, because there are times where I feel like profanity is used for the sake of using profanity. It doesn't feel organic. In this film, there's never a time where I feel like the language feels anything but organic.
Yeah, it just feels correct the entire way through. I don't ever really, it's easy to get lost in this movie, and that's what any form of performance art is. The goal is suspension of disbelief, right? Like you want people to forget they're watching a show, and for the entirety of this, even just while I'm doing my rewatch and trying to take notes, and then trying to help out with my 9-month-old baby and how busy she is, and I have to hit pause once in a while. But I am able to jump right back into it and then forget everything else around me while I'm watching it. And it's, that I think that's a big indicator of how great the entire cast is, how great Scorsese is, but also the amount of improv that happens. Because, if things are scripted, sometimes it feels scripted, you know what I mean? But if if a lot of it is improvised, then that isn't. It's almost like it's not acting, you know what I mean? It's just that, they're just pretending to be somebody else, but with their own words. And maybe I'm just making crap up right now, but I feel like I'm a little bit philosophical.
It's definitely a challenge. And speaking of improvisation, I want to talk about the scene where they visit Tommy's mom because they need to pick up a shovel. We'll talk more about this later. That is, and I think this Easter egg is kind of commonly known, but Tommy's mother is played by Martin Scorsese's mother. That's his real mom that's on set. The funny thing about this scene is she wasn't told where they came from or what they were doing. The only thing she was told was that she was to welcome her son Tommy home because she hadn't seen him in a while. Everything else is improvised. There's only like one line of dialogue that was actually written for this scene, and it was about the painting. And I think somehow that's connected to the author, Nicholas Pileggi's mom. I think somehow she wrote that, or she had done that. I'm going to get this wrong. But it's somehow connected. There's something about that painting that's actually kind of an Easter egg as well. But just to think that whole scene is improvised, and how well it works, is just really impressive. Another improvised scene, and this is, we're going to talk about the scene more later too. One of the few scenes that's in the film that doesn't actually come from the book is the "How am I funny" scene. Probably one of the most iconic scenes in Goodfellas. This came from Joe Pesci's experience as a waiter. And he was the one who had said to a mobster that he was funny, and it wasn't taken well. And everything was improv from there. Now, what's interesting about this is obviously they'd rehearsed the scene a little bit, but the supporting cast was not told what was going on. They didn't have the script. They didn't know what was going on. So when you see their reactions, those are the real reactions of the actors portraying those characters, because they did not know what the hell was going on.
And that's just so great. You hear a lot of anecdotes. If you do any sort of deep dive into film or television, you're going to stumble across some stories here, some anecdotes about actors who were in on it and some who weren't, just because the director wanted to get a genuine, authentic reaction from the other character, and they maintain character. Like that's that's like rule number one. You know this. You're a theater major. Never break character ever, no matter what.
I think there's a good example of that with Die Hard when they drop Hans Gruber. It was supposed to be like 1, 2, 3, and they dropped him on 2. So it was like his real reaction, Alan Rickman's real reaction to getting dropped because he got dropped before he thought he was going to. I think that's a great example of one of the things you were talking about.
Yeah, and if you're performing Shakespeare and like a can light falls from the rafters, you gotta pretend like God just threw a meteor at you. Like that's you just never break character. And I think everybody does a pretty good job with that, especially considering that some of them are probably not, and not to say they're not great actors, but they are not known to have the chops that everybody else does. All these supporting characters, they don't even have lines. They're just there to be, background fodder and,
and you think about
some chuckles.
You think about how intimidating Joe Pesci is. I mean, the guy's like maybe 5'3" if he's standing on a phone book.
Yeah.
Like, and how intimidating and how threatening he is throughout this movie, but especially in this scene. It's some of his best work.
He brings that same intimidation to his character in Casino. He basically plays the same character in Casino, but yeah, it's funny. I could probably make a Family Guy reference to literally anything in pop culture, anything at all. And there is a really great bit in Family Guy where they talk about, this is Joe Pesci, and for some reason in the 80s, this was seen as a tough guy. He's like 5'0", and it's funny because you're like, wow, I didn't realize he was that short, but he sure pulls it off. Like he does the trick. Like I wouldn't ever want to piss off Tommy in this movie at all.
Nope. There's nothing good that comes of that. Going to our next behind the scenes details, the long shot. I think you know what I mean here. The long shot. Henry and Karen, they're going into the Copacabana club, and it's one take. It's a long take.
It's 3 minutes.
Holy cow! It's impressive.
It's almost exactly 3 minutes. It's a continuous shot. They take very deliberate opportunities, mostly to the end of the cut, but instead of doing like jump cuts, they pan. Like whenever they bring the table down front and center, and the table next to them, it's probably a bunch of other wise guys, sends them a bottle of wine or champagne, whatever it is. They pan over to that table after they say like, oh, this is from the gentleman next table. They pan over and show them like toasting to them, then they pan back over. Like those could have been jump cuts, and they weren't. And they do a great job of, anybody in the service industry knows how insane a kitchen of that size for a restaurant and a club, of that.
Yes.
Porch. They do a good job of making it look like it's a real kitchen. It's operating at the time. Maybe it really was. I don't know, but it simulates that busyness, that chaos. Everybody's got to do, a thing. So there's multiple characters here who have either a mark to hit or a quick line to deliver. And then you have the kitchen stuff going on. And then you've got the camera work, okay? Because that's not CGI. Like there's literally a person operating this. Even if they're on like a robotic track, there's still something happening where it's forcing this camera to move back and forth. All those things have to hit. And then you've got the one-liner comedian that gets up, and he gets to do like 3 bits before they finally cut away to them stealing. And
one of the takes got
really
goofed
awesome.
up because one of the takes got goofed up because he forgot his joke.
That's hilarious, and it was his own joke because he played himself. I forget what his name was, but he played himself, and he screwed up his own joke. It's wonderful. And by the way,
another quick note on that scene.
Perfect song selection. Then He Kissed Me by the Crystals. It fits exactly the time period, the style of everything, the tone of that scene. It's just there's great music selection throughout this whole thing. I'll drop a few as we go along if it makes sense to say it, because I did take a lot of notes on the music, and I'm always going to pick that stuff out too. As far as any film goes, I'm going to pay attention to it. And a great film is going to always have, even if it's not, soundtrack, made up of huge, top charting hits. If it makes sense, if it fits, I'm going to notice. Even if it's an original work, it's great. So
Oh, I definitely want to get into the music of this film for sure. A couple quick things on this Copacabana scene before we move on. You mentioned the maitre d'. That's actually the maitre d' who worked in the real Copacabana. They got the real guy to do it, which is kind of cool. The reason they actually did this long shot, they didn't have to do it the way they did it, but the reason they filmed them going in the back way is they didn't have permission to go in the short way. So they went in the back way and decided to do it as this crazy long shot that stands up in cinema history for sure. And it also took 8 takes to get it. So we're gonna veer off from the behind the scenes details for just a second because you brought up the music, and it's hard not to talk about the music choices throughout this movie because you when you actually realize how much of this movie doesn't have music under it, it's not much. There is music playing almost throughout the entire film, and the choices made and the songs that were picked. You hear it and you immediately have a feeling of that time period. Like that song evokes that era so well with the choices that were made. And there's, and like you had mentioned, the choice of Then He Kissed Me. If you look at what is actually heard in the song, Scorsese picks these for very specific reasons, specific song titles with specific lyrics for that moment. And
they help tell the story. I mean, the intro song is Rags to Riches. And what more do you need than this, poor half Irish, half Italian kid, who idolizes these mobsters and sees that they get to do whatever they want. He's poor. He's living in a tiny home with multiple siblings. And this song comes
getting
on.
The crap beat out of him.
And, talking about rags to riches, that's part of the allure to organized crime, or really any crime for that matter, is to go from nothing to something, zero to hero. And that's the first song of the entire film.
It's I'm really in awe of how well the music was chosen throughout this movie. Like I said, it's most of this movie has music underneath it, and it just sets the mood so well.
Yeah, even like during some of Ray Liotta's like narration, it's playing something. A couple others. I mean, the "Give Me Shelter."
Of course,
the Stones. That song I'll listen to that song while watching cartoons, man. Like that's fantastic. But it's, that's like right as Paulie is warning Henry, to quit screwing out the drugs. And then it's, kind of morphs into the setup for the Lufthansa heist. So, that was really, really great. Jump Into the Fire, the Harry Nilsson, it plays during his frantic day near the end. He's all cooked up in the helicopter thing. And they actually play that song like 3 times, I think, throughout the entire film, but that one's very fitting. It works. It works really well with what was going on. And then
it builds the paranoia really well, and just you're right. It underscores that perfectly.
Ain't That a Kick in the Head? It's a Dean Martin song. It plays all the time. I mean, I think the first time I ever really recognized that song as being something great was playing Fallout New Vegas. That's on one of the stations you pick up on the Wasteland, and I always really, really liked it. I always liked the club performance, big band kind of sound. I mean, love Sinatra, Dean Martin, that's all great. And there's a lot of that to this, and of course, if you think Vegas, really, you think Rat Pack, you think mob, Sinatra is well known to have been involved in that shenanigans, and it all fits. It's authentic. They none of this was done by accident. This is all very deliberate, and it was very well executed.
Absolutely. So getting back to some behind the scenes details, they actually brought in several real gangsters to be part of the film, be in the background. It was kind of tough to pay them, though, because they kept giving fake Social Security numbers so the checks wouldn't go through properly, which these guys aren't used to using real Social Security numbers. I don't even know if a lot of these guys even know what their real Social Security number is.
Well, if they might not even have one assigned to them. At the end of the movie, he's in court. He's talking about, the only reason you would ever know he's alive is his birth certificate and his arrest record, because he says his driver's license, Social Security number were all fake. He never voted. Yep. All of his property was in mother-in-law's name, all this and that. So, like, they probably don't actually have. I mean, some of them were probably, at this point, the correct phrase is undocumented immigrants. They were probably here illegally,
probably
without any kind of visa, but it didn't matter. There wasn't really any enforcement of that back then.
Yeah. De Niro wanted real money instead of prop money because he didn't like how the prop money felt in his hands. So the prop master had to pull out $5,000 of his own money. After every take, they would then have to, everybody stopped. Nobody could leave the set till all that money came back. But that's because De Niro wanted that authenticity, which I just think is pretty funny, especially as often as you see him flashing money.
Being like craft services and like having to get the deviled eggs put away or something before they go bad, and you're not allowed to move because they can't find like $12.
Yeah, it's in somebody's pocket that he shoved it into and didn't remember like how much he put in.
5,000. Yeah, like the prop guy like took that suit away and put it in the back, and that would be a lot. That would be a lot.
So another thing I'd read, one of the first things they shot, if not the first thing they shot for this movie, was Maury's commercial for his wigs. Scorsese was inspired by a very low budget local window replacement commercial he had seen. So he went to the company owner and he wanted to know who had produced the commercial. So it turns out the guy who owned this company wrote and directed the ad. So he hired him to write and direct this ad for Maury to give it that same authentic feel, which it's every bad late night infomercial you've ever seen. Or actually, are there even still late night infomercials on? Is that still a thing, or are those gone now? I don't even know.
I haven't had like live TV cable. It's been like 7 years. So I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, who even watches that when you've got Netflix and Hulu and everything else? One of the last ones that I'm going to mention here real quick. When Henry's placed in witness protection, we see a quick glimpse of the newspaper as he picks it up, and it's the Youngstown Vindicator, which is Youngstown, based out of Youngstown, Ohio. It's a city I lived in for 6 years when I went to school, and it was there for a couple of years afterwards. Youngstown has its own illustrious history with the mafia. In fact, there was a nightclub I DJ'd at for a while. Quick story that. Was actually at one time in its history, this building was a mafia hangout at one point. And I didn't find this out till I'd been working there for a couple months, but the exact spot where I used to park was where a car bomb had gone off and took out like some big shot mafia guy in the 70s. It was like literally the exact spot where I parked my car. So that's my little connection.
You were stepping into history, quite literally stepping into history. That's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I might have had a little bit of
his family, but he probably deserved it.
Yeah, I mean, some of his residual DNA might have been on the bottom of my Nikes at that point. Like, who knows? The last one, and this is actually, we'll get into this a little bit later. There's not a lot about this movie that I don't like, and there's not a lot about this movie that I go, I don't know why they did that. So the movie ends with Tommy just shooting, double six guns right at the screen, just bang, 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 and it doesn't fit because Tommy's dead at this point. Like I never really understood why that was there, except that maybe just had a little bit of like manicness, just a little bit of just that aggression at the end of the movie. And I never really understood. Well, I never really felt like it fit.
So I would say that it does seem a little bit out of place with the tone.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to fit there very well. So that's actually a reference to the Great Train Robbery. There's a scene at the end of the movie with the guy with, a pair of revolvers just shooting kind of right at the screen. And that's actually a direct reference to that film, having Tommy there at the end shooting right at the camera. So if you've ever wondered like why that was there, that's why it's there. I'm not going to tell you I think it works. I still don't think that actually works. I would probably not have included that, but that's why that's there. So, we're going to move into another segment. One of the things I've always found really interesting about this is thinking about where these people are now. And I'm going to stick to just the ones that are, our primary characters. So,
and these are
Henry and Karen,
life, like the real life people, not the actors.
The real people that, yeah. Henry and Karen, they finally divorced in 1989. We see that at the end of the film. But what we don't find out is that Karen actually does take full custody of the kids. Henry goes on to, be engaged one other time. I think he's got a third kid by one of these other women that he was married to or linked with. Jimmy Conway / Jimmy Burke. That's his real name, Jimmy Burke. He actually dies in prison on April 13th, 1996 at the age of 64. I can remember there was one time you and I were watching this and we got to the end credits and it said he would be eligible for parole in like 2004, which, when this movie comes out in 1990, you're like, Holy cow, like 2004. That's so long
Flying
away. I can't
cars.
even believe like how yeah, flying cars, and teleportation.
Meals in
Yeah.
pill form.
We don't have those. Yeah. Yeah. So meanwhile, here we are 2021 in 2004. It's the year I graduated college. Like, it's the year you graduated high school. Like, that seems
Yeah,
forever
and that
ago.
was no, it was like 10 minutes ago. We don't have to play around with it.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So I remember us watching it one time thinking, holy cow, 2004, that's not that far away. Jimmy Conway could be out on the street any minute now. No, he died in 96. So he would, 6 years after this movie came out, Jimmy Conway shuffles off this mortal coil. Paulie, Paul Cicero / Paul Vario, his real name, dies in prison on March 22nd, 1988 at the age of 73. We do see that at the end of the film.
Which was his biggest
Henry Hill
fear, by the way. That was his,
dying in prison.
That was his big middle finger to everybody, like, quit dicking around. I'm an old man as it is. I'm not dying in prison. The guy that I know is going to die in prison. He's a bum. He's a loser for, getting involved.
Yep. Our hero, quote unquote, like massive air quotes around hero, Henry Hill, dies June 12th, 2012, the day after his 69th birthday, from heart disease complications. Certainly brought on by a lifetime of chain smoking and all of the other various chemicals and drugs he ingested into himself. He really did struggle throughout his life with addiction and pretty much every narcotic you can imagine that's out there. He gobbled them.
Not. I mean, living that life. I mean, you really got it. If you get out. And first of all, I guess one of my biggest lingering questions is, how did this dude not get whacked? Like, he flipped. And they made a movie about it. Like, they wrote a book about it, then they made a movie about it. You don't think somebody has some kind of lingering animosity or primal, like, pride or ego about that? Like,
so they actually cover this a little bit in the book, especially in the 25th anniversary. They were moved like 5 times to various different places. Pledgy never actually knew for sure where they were, but they were moved like 5 times.
Henry Hill, real life Henry Hill, was on Howard Stern. Like, he was
yeah, so he
and stuff.
He showed up after, so they got him out of witness protection after Jimmy Burke dies, because that was the last person they believed was really going to pose a true threat to killing him. Yeah. Everybody else, it would have just been, who cares at this point? Let the guy live his life.
Well, yeah, because
but
that
was
all
the last thing kept him.
It's not the same as, like, American, like, gangs, where it's really it is all ego and pride, and it's a matter of principle. Like, if you snitch, you get killed. It doesn't matter if it's my beef or not. I heard you snitched, and I'm gonna have to kill you. Yeah. For them, it's all about is making a body worth the heat that comes with it.
And think about what's going on in 96. I mean, there's still a mafia presence, but it's not what it was when this movie first starts. They don't have the power. They don't have the control they once did. So
yeah, because that's like when the federal government was really stomping out organized crime big time. I mean, this is after Jimmy Hoffa, and the feds really start flexing the RICO muscle, and judges aren't being bought anymore, and you really can't do too much out of bounds stuff and continue to
so yeah, that's how he was able to end up on Howard Stern and things like that. So yeah, he is no longer with us. He did, however, write another book called Gangsters and Goodfellas that covers his life after the events of the film that we saw, which I've actually got that on order at the library. I'm kind of curious to check that out, and I'm going to be really excited to see how that story turns out, because I've heard that's a pretty crazy story as well.
What's a library?
Tommy. Yeah, I use it pretty regularly. Tommy. We see him in the movie getting whacked, and we are told it's because of his involvement in the murder of Billy Batts. The real Tommy DeSimone's body is actually never recovered. So it's believed that more things happened to him before he was actually killed, but officially his body has never been recovered.
What a great term whacked is, too. This was my first exposure to that in reference to being murdered. And it really, honestly, this goes back to my lack of maturity, but the word whacked became part of my regular vernacular pretty much immediately after I watched this for the first time. And I don't know that it ever left.
Well, you think about just the euphemism whacked. you think about murder. You say the word murder, and that means something. Whacked,
Murder. Yeah.
yeah, it means
Well,
something a little bit different. So
it's kind of like, and I'll throw another Family Guy reference out real quick, but great episode. It's a mob thing, and Peter's asking this guy, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to whack a guy, off a guy, whack off a guy? Because I'm married, and
right.
it's just rapid fire, and it's real funny. But the whacked versus murdered it's kind of like the same. Like, think about the word penis. Okay, it sounds vulgar. Like, I know people heard this just now and we're like, ooh, because it sounds vulgar, but that's like the correct.
It's the actual term for
it. Right, like that's the scientific medical term. Whereas if you say wiener or ding dong or thingy, it's like maybe a little bit more socially acceptable, but it's slang. But it feels less harsh on the ears. That's the whacked and murder thing. I just made that.
I think it works though. So we're going to move into favorite scene of the movie, and then so we're going to talk about what, and it's going to be tough to narrow it down. Although I do have one favorite scene for sure, and then I want to talk about, because on Matt Goes to the Movies, he's got a rating scale 1 to 5 reels. And that's the scale we use for all of the TV shows that we review, all the movies that are reviewed. When we pick a movie that you and I are going to talk about for the extended podcast universe show, Rob's Reviews, we're picking movies that are five reels for both of us. Like, we're not picking stuff that we don't just absolutely adore and love. So trying to narrow it down to just a favorite scene, that's where it gets a little more challenging, I think, sometimes. But that's why we kind of have to do it a little bit different. So, so if you've got a favorite scene, let's hear what it is. And then if there's a scene that on future rewatches you would skip. So is there a scene where it just either it doesn't work for you, or you just don't really enjoy it, you don't like it, instead of having Spider get your cuddy water for you, you go up and get it yourself. Like, that's when you refill it. Would you have one of those for this movie?
All right, so spoiler alert, I can't pick one favorite scene. There's like 12. I'm not kidding. I have so many.
Yeah.
It's really, I'm not going to do it. I refuse to do it. Fire me if you need to, but I'm not gonna.
No, it's fair. How about a skippable scene?
Throwaways. There's a couple. I mean, I understand that the wedding scene was somewhat necessary because that's a milestone, and he shows the traditional family thing. But like when Karen's talking about all the introductions, everybody, and it was kind of just lame. It dragged it down. It wasn't
where everybody's named Peter, Paul, or Mary, and it's like, do you need that?
Yeah,
I don't know.
It wasn't very mobby, if we're gonna start making up words. Also didn't really care for the scene where Karen like first starts hanging out with all the other wives and girlfriends, where they're she's talking about how pretty much disgusting these women are as far as like the stuff they talked about and how they act and everything. And so like that was kind of dumb. I didn't really care for that because, to be honest, like biological family and marital family is not a huge subject in this movie. It just doesn't really come up. Like you see Henry's kids, you don't even really know their names unless you pay really close attention. Like I know the one kid's name is Ruth. I don't know what the other kid's name was, but like they just don't talk about it. You hear like the kids once in a while, but it's literally not a focus. And so I didn't think that was necessary. And then like when he's walking around, what is it, Janice, I think is his girlfriend, her apartment, that was kind of a waste of 10 minutes. I don't think that was really necessary to have that. I mean, it kind of introduces you to what the hell is her name? The one who ends up cutting all his coke for him later. Like she shows up
the second girlfriend that we see.
Yeah. So those were ones that I could do without. I don't think that they help. They don't move the story along in any sort of direction. If you deleted them, nobody would notice.
Yeah. So for me, I do have a favorite scene, and it's the why. What do you mean I'm funny? That to me is, I adore that scene. I adore everything about it. It's so well acted. It's there. And in terms of skippable scenes or things that it's maybe it doesn't work. So it's hard to disagree with anything that you just said. But I'm gonna highlight two scenes that if I'm going to get up and refill my beverage, or use the bathroom or whatever, kind of just drift off and not pay attention to the movie. There's really two that I would highlight, and they kind of have something in common. The why did you do that, Karen? Why did you do that? Where he's screaming at her, and they never would have found that. That scene, as well as the scene where she's got the gun, he wakes up and he can actually see he can see the copper of the rounds that are pointed at him.
See, and that's actually, and I get why you say it, but that's like in my grouping of highlights. I think it's really iconic.
Well, so here's what, and I'm not going to disagree with that.
Because it's point of view from both. You've got the dichotomy of both of their perspectives. I think it's kind of cool.
Oh, sure. And here's the thing: is these scenes are well acted. They're well written. They're incredibly effective scenes. And my complaint here, and why I call this a skippable scene, is not on the execution of the scene. I just don't really like watching domestic disputes on film. Now, you and I are lucky where we didn't have that growing up. We didn't grow up in a house where there were physical altercations and screaming and yelling and throwing plates and things like that. We're pretty lucky in that way. Not everybody is.
No doubt.
So it's not like I have like a personal history with domestic violence and disputes that like I'm really just like triggered by it or anything. It's just I'm not a big fan of seeing it on screen. And the scenes, both of these scenes I'm referencing are, incredibly well acted. They really work. They are essential to the story, but I just don't enjoy watching them. That's just a me thing.
Anecdote here, personal slice. My wife happened to be in the room whenever this scene was on, whenever I was doing my review. And I asked her, I said, is that how I would wake up if you found out I was, shucking some side corn? And she said, nope. She said, nope. And I'm like,
they just left it at that.
Would I wake up at all? And she said,
that's nope. Not ominous.
So, it's funny because it's exactly, the next scene after that in the movie is really funny because it's Jimmy and Paulie talking to Henry at his girlfriend's house, like telling him he's got to go home and stuff. And, Paulie's talking about keeping up appearances. And Jimmy's like, they're saying like how you can't get a divorce and blah, blah, blah. And Paulie's like, she won't divorce you. And Jimmy's like, yeah, she won't divorce you. She'll kill you.
She'll kill you. She won't divorce you. Yep. So
yeah, it was good. Yeah. I do. If I could, I'll touch super quick on favorites.
Gun to your head, favorite scene. Gun to your head right now.
I could maybe narrow it down to 5. I mean, like the whole, after Paulie gets invested in the restaurant real early on in the movie, after the you're a funny guy thing. Oh yeah. F you, pay me, like that little monologue is iconic to me. When they're burning the place down, soon after that, Tommy and Henry are in the car and Tommy starts saying, and Henry's like, no. And Tommy's like, no, what, Henry? Who the F asked you anything? Because he doesn't say asked, it's axed.
No, he definitely says axed.
And then he's, saying, and he's like completely beside himself that, quote, a Jew broad is prejudiced against Italians. As he's being somewhat flippant towards some cultural sensitivity, and he's just indignant that somebody could be prejudiced against Italians. I think the pistol whip scene is probably going to be very close to maybe top 3 for me.
Okay,
because that's like, as a dude, every dude, if whether you really believe it or you just secretly want it, wants to be that kind of alpha. Like you just want to be a bro, right? Like you want to be able to show up in someone's driveway like Ray Liotta. This is a Dennis Leary bit, and pistol whip somebody in the face for crossing your partner. That's about as alpha as it gets. I mean, that's part of what really drives Henry and his motivation for everything, and as far as getting involved with the mob. And another thing that's slightly less culturally sensitive, when Henry shows up right after their wedding, and Karen's mom is getting on her about who goes out and doesn't call and blah blah blah. What kind of people are these? He shows up, and she immediately, the mother-in-law, just starts coming at him right at his neck with questions. And he just turns around and walks away. And
yes,
then,
I adore that. He doesn't even say that. He just laughs.
Yeah, he starts laughing, and she's coming at him. And then Karen freaks out, and she's blaming her mom. She's not blaming her husband, who was out all night without calling, because holy crap,
right.
Why would you do that? But then, I don't know if it's him or Tommy, but one of them says, shut up. Could you just, everybody pause for a moment if you're married and you've been married for more than 10 minutes. Imagine telling your mother-in-law to shut up in front of your wife.
Oh, yeah.
And
oh, no, that would not go well in my house.
And leaving with a pulse. Like they just leave and they're alive. So that was really, really great. Just for cinematic purposes, not because I want to do that. And then Karen talking about she wanted to go shopping, and, Henry's like, how much money do you need? And she says this much, and she holds her index finger and her thumb. It's in the realm of like 3 inches apart. She's asking for a physical measurement of cash, not like a numerical value. And that's really funny. I mean, if you're talking about rich people being ridiculously wealthy, and they had tons of disposable income, and so she says this much, and he says how much, and he comes over and this much, and then she starts to hit the old left stick on the Xbox controller, which is crouch in most first person shooters. And then Henry says, oh, all right. And that's really funny. The Billy Bats scene, him and Tommy, that scene is going to go pretty close to the top of the list with the pistol whip scene. The whole shine box thing, that's an iconic line. That's a frequently recited line in our paternal side of our families. Really, really great. The whole sequence, at Tommy's mother's house afterwards is really cool. The scene with Spider, both scenes, I guess, with Spider, fantastic. Love that stuff. I think the POV, the point of view scene with the gun back and forth, that's cool.
That's definitely well shot. I'm not going to argue any of those.
I think it's
points.
Artistic. It's cool, but I could see where you could throw that away and you wouldn't lose anything. I mean, that's really where Karen sort of first shows some cracks in her, shell. The scene where Tommy shows up to kill Stax, I thought was really, really funny. There's a lot of comedy there that is sort of dark, but it works. Forgot to mention in the music section, Cream, Sunshine of Your Love is playing where all that stuff's going on. That's really cool. And that might really be it for favorites. I think there's a lot. I'm sorry. It's just a lot.
Well, and again, so when you think about how Rob's reviews started, it was films that we absolutely just love and are right at the top, and films that have had long lasting impact. It makes sense that there would be a lot of these scenes that you just, there's something about it that draws you to it. It's just, there's something magnetic about that scene that just sticks with you for a long period of time, which is really going to lead us into the next segment, which is notable and quotable. A lot of the things that are in here are scenes that you just made reference to. So I'm going to kind of go through some of the ones that I wrote down pretty quickly. And I'll tell you what I found really interesting on my most recent rewatch. One of the things we've talked about with Goodfellas is that it has so many iconic lines. And when you try to boil it down to just the actual line itself, what you find is that it's actually hard to do, because so much of this movie is improvisational, and it's back and forth. The characters are sort of talking a little bit over top of each other at the same time, or not necessarily letting somebody finish a thought, or it's saying something, another character responds, and then saying something else, right on. So it's hard to get just, one line kind of things. So I'm going to try to go through here, and I'm going to throw out a list, and I'm going to have you try to see if you can pick your 3 favorite out of this list, and then see if there's anything you have that I don't have down here. And I think when you think about this movie in absolute, most quotable and all-time great lines from the movie, what do you mean I'm funny? And every permutation of that line, he says that same line a bunch of different ways. But what do you mean I'm funny? I think it's right up there for me. Now go home and get your bleeping shine box. That's that's another great one. I do love later on in that scene. Go
when
ahead.
he says it, it's dripping with condescension.
Oh
He's
yeah,
trying to tell him, know your place, because I'm a made
yeah.
guy and you're not. You're nobody to me. So like
Deal with it.
it's really well acted, and that dude has been in a lot of movies as a less than secondary character even, and he does a really good job. As far as I always remember like seeing this guy like, oh, that was Billy Bats. I see him all the time, but I think he does
Yeah,
a
he
good
just
job. He's a
died
good
recently.
actor. Oh, that's a bummer. But yeah, he's a good actor.
Yeah, within
And he
the
plays
last, I
that
think, 2
part.
years.
He plays that part excellent. It is exactly the type of dude that this movie is like trying to put out there. They're trying to set a type, like a stereotype. This is the made guy. This is the
Yep.
Italian. This is the do what you want. You can screw with anybody you want, and nobody can screw with you unless they have a really good reason. And he was reminding everybody in the room of that. And Tommy's a hothead and a cowboy and has a lot to prove, as they said, and he couldn't take it.
Yep.
I
also love later in that scene when De Niro responds back, "Oh no, you insulted him a little. You insulted him a little
bit. Yeah,
you insulted him a little bit.
Sort of play a little bit of the attorney. Like you insulted him a little bit. Like he was just mitigating a little bit. And then later, another good one that's part of the same kind of scene set was when Tommy said, "I didn't want to get blood on your floors."
Yes.
Like it was unnecessary. It was probably not.
A murder has just happened. A person's soul has been separated from his earthly form.
And stomped this dude so hard that the cylinder fell out of the revolver. Like it was, there was definitely like blood squirting. Like this is one of the more brutal scenes in the movie. Like there's not really a lot of action in this movie, but like the stuff that is more than just dialogue is extremely, it's visceral. Like it's brutal. It's hard to watch. Like if you're sensitive to violence, this is not really a great movie to watch. I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 scenes that are, it's not that many. We're talking about a runtime of over 2 hours, 2.5 hours, about, 146 minutes. So, that's as close to 2.5 hours as you can be. And not really that many, but the ones that exist, man, they tip the scale pretty hard. They're tough.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. So how many stunts do you even really count in this movie? Are there any?
Like, was there a stunt guy at all?
Well, I mean, some of the pistol whipping that requires a stunt coordinator to do to work out how they're going to do that.
Not a stunt guy, because they were clearly just the same people. They were the actors doing that. And a lot of the violence was sort of one-sided. Like when talking about when they were pistol whipping and stomping Billy Bats, you're only seeing it really from his perspective, which it was kind of adds to the brutality of it almost.
Yeah.
But it sort of makes it easier from a filmmaking perspective. Like you don't have to show damage on this guy's face in real time, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Another one you had mentioned, you touched on it in favorite scene, but as far as a notable and quotable line, business bad, F you pay me. That's just, there's a whole stretch of it. I enjoy that one. Another one that I think is pretty iconic. You took your first pinch like a man, never rat on your friends, and always keep your mouth shut. That whole scene followed up with, "Hey, you broke your cherry." Like that's. I think these are, those are right up there for me.
Because don't forget that part. Henry is like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
This is a kid. This is a 9th grade kid.
Yeah. And he didn't he didn't fold in front of the cops, which was probably how they decided to keep him around and give him more responsibility. I don't know that this necessarily is going to land for everybody, but I absolutely love. I'm going to go get the papers. Get the papers. I don't know why I love that. It's just so silly. So that's another one for me. You had kind of talked about it earlier when Henry shows up just 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, drunk out of his mind, and his mother-in-law is giving him the business, and he just turns around and laughs. And my actual favorite part of that scene is when Pesci's yelling, "Where were you? Why didn't you call? What kind of person are you, Henry?" And I always love that there's that little D that comes into Henry's name sometimes, and he calls him Henry.
He does that for the first time when they're the young versions of themselves. He says something like, "How you doing, Henry?" That's deliberate. Like that's got to be on purpose, because there's no way that 2 pairs of actors do it the exact same way without it being on purpose. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's hilarious because Pesci is 100% the devil on Ray Liotta's shoulder. Like he's the devil on everybody's shoulder, and sometimes stomping your face out. You know what I mean? And there's some other sort of art house type stuff with talking about like satanic stuff, like when they're digging up Billy Bats 6 months later. That scene, the entire scene, there's a red tint to the whole thing, and it's smoky. It's like they're in hell and they're digging up a body that of a guy that they killed that they were not supposed to kill. This is the most secretive possible thing, and like there's no way that any realistic pair of running lights are going to cause that amount of red.
No,
so like that was very much deliberate too, and I thought that was pretty cool. I made sure to note that, but that's Tommy is pretty much Satan. I mean that's it.
Going to some other lines that are just great from this movie. They're in the kitchen at Tommy's mom's house, and he's saying his paw, hoof, got caught in the grill. I got to hack it off.
Jimmy just says it. Like, he just throws it out there. What got it caught in there was a paw. What is it, a paw? Jimmy's like, a hoof. Yeah.
Yes.
Just a hoof.
It's great.
Like, Tommy's telling his mom, he's like, I can't leave it in there. It's a sin, Ma. Like, it's like, it's a sin. Like, this dude's worried about sins,
Kind of back to back, some great lines that sort of string together. When Jimmy's talking to Henry, that thing we took care of upstate, we got to get it out of there. Followed up by, here's an arm, here's a leg, here's a wing.
Here's a wing. Go for the old
or
do you
go for the old hearts and lungs? Yeah, just and that's why when I introduced this segment, notable and quotable, I thought this would actually be easier to do because there's in your mind, you think of Goodfellas as having all these great lines, but you realize that it's a series of great lines that are part of a scene that like string together. It's not just one actual line.
Yeah, they have like 10, 15-minute segments that are phenomenal. And I don't know how many
just even later on. So
after
after he kills Spider, he said, and Jimmy's kind of admonishing him. And when I say admonishing, like he just killed a kid, and Jimmy's like, it's like a slap on the wrist that he's giving him. It just in the same way.
What's the matter with you? He's
what's the matter with you? Yeah,
he's like little kid yelling at him. You've embarrassed me in front of everybody. That's what it is.
It's unbelievable.
Which, and he's saying that very easily could have been Henry. Like if you're looking at a rewind, like what Spider is doing is very much exactly what Henry would have been doing. They didn't show it, but he was an errand boy. He was, he did bitch work. He did little kid stuff, stuff they could trust him to do. He was allowed to hang around. He was allowed to listen in and be part of something, but he was never part of it until he was really part of it, So this Spider character, it could have easily been Henry, and he got killed because Tommy is a psychopath. I mean, that is literally all there is to it.
Yeah.
But I will say, I will never forget the first time I watched this when Spider tells Tommy, why don't you go after yourself, Tommy? Like, he just had shot him in the foot because he was being a jackass. Like, Tommy was a lunatic and shot the kid in the foot. And then, we're not sure how much time in the movie transpires, but it's not long. He's still wearing the bandage on his foot. I mean, Tommy even says it's the size of your head. But then he tells him to go F himself. And if you know anything about Tommy in this movie, like, that's literally one of the last things you should ever say to the dude and expect to continue to breathe. And he says it, and I'm like, ooh, and everybody else has the same reaction. Like, they all react the same way. And it was fantastic. And you just think like, oh my God, that was terrible. What's going to happen next? And what's going to happen next. But still, when you see what happens, you're still like, Jesus. Like it really, that was impactful. That was a heavy scene.
Yeah. So I want to move on to kind of towards the end here. Like I said, on the Matt Goes to the Movies show, typically we're ranking things 1 to 5 reels. Clearly this is a 5-reel movie for both of us. So we kind of have to do a new scale. We can't just work with that. So, for the purposes of the extended podcast universe here on Rob's Reviews, we're going with kind of a different scale. So we go with rewatchability rating. And we also talk about Pantheon points. So we're going to start with rewatchability rating. So Eric, I'm going to have you go first. And I'm going to run down how the scoring criteria works. It's 1 to 5, where 5 would be, I will watch this start to finish every time it's on. I'm locked in. 4, I'm going to put it on and then I'm going to play with my phone in between scenes I love. 3, this is background noise while I'm doing housework. 2, it's a film I enjoy, but I'm not sure I'm going to go out of my way to watch it again. Or 1, it just doesn't hold up the way I remember it. So, Goodfellas, where does it rank for you?
It's going to be high fours. I mean, if it's not a 5, because your our 4 ranking here is, you're gonna play with your phone between scenes that you love. I that's this movie. This movie is a collection of scenes that I love. So I really, and I think the acting is fantastic throughout. Like there's probably not a spot where I'm like, that's kind of a hack job. I didn't really feel like that for any of it. Even the most uninvolved tertiary characters, they really were believable the entire time. Again, the suspension of disbelief. I've believed this entire movie, start to finish. I believe the whole thing. And that is super important for me for rewatchability, because if it sucks, then I'm not going to watch it again. But and I will admit, this is the first time I've watched this, and it's probably been a couple years. But I mean, I've watched it closer to 20 times if I'm going to put a number on it. And I've never regretted starting it, and I will always watch the entire thing. Like it's, again, 2.5-hour commitment, but I'm in the whole way, no matter what. So it's, if it's not a 5, it's a 4.9 for me.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in that same area. So again, like we had talked about when we were reviewing Fight Club, I kind of gauge how much I enjoy something by, can I watch it without feeling like I'm going to, we're so phone obsessed now. Like we're so into social media. We're so into our email. We're so into, checking sports scores or just seeing what's going on in the world, that it's, because we have these devices available to us, it's hard for us, for a lot of people, and I'm including myself in this, to just do one thing at a time. Just do one thing and only do that one thing and not be distracted by trying to do 2 or 3 other things. So I sat down to watch this again last night, and I was actually really excited to sit down because I probably have also not watched this movie start to finish. It's been a couple years, probably. This is a tough movie to watch when you have 3 small children at home, because you got to do it when they're not home or when they're asleep. So I started
do earmuffs
this
for 2.5 hours. It's not
no, because there's not even a 2-minute stretch where there's not an F-bomb like you were talking about earlier.
But
so for me so I started this last night, probably about 10:30. Knowing, I probably even a little bit later than that, knowing full well that it was going to be pretty late by the time it finished up. And I thought to myself, well, if I find myself getting tired, I'll just go to bed and I'll finish watching it tomorrow. I just watched the whole thing. Like the only time I reached for my phone was to, write something down that I thought was an interesting, moment, or to record a thought about something. When this movie starts, from the time this movie starts, and you hear they're driving down the highway and Billy Batts is in the trunk to the end. I'm locked in. I'm engaged with this movie. It doesn't lose me. It doesn't feel, there's maybe some points we talked about it where maybe it steps off the gas just a little bit, but it's all world building. It's all things that are important to set the stage for this story between Henry and Karen.
Filled with good acting, which was important. Yes. Like, because if you're going to have some downtime, if it's well acted, it passes, like you accept it. And another cool parallel, if we're going to scroll back, we talked about Fight Club, like the intro to the movie, and then how much movie you have until you get back to the intro. It's actually almost exactly 1 hour into
I was thinking that
that you get back to the intro of the movie. So you have an hour of movie stuff, and then you get to the point and you're like, holy crap, that's where we started. And there's a lot of stuff that happens before that, and there's a lot of stuff that happens after too. So it is kind of cool, because it really gives you a sort of a watermark to look at and understand how different things were before it and after it. And it's interesting. It's a good thing.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to call this movie as a 5 for me on the rewatchability rating, which is going to move us into Pantheon points. I think sometimes with movies, especially movies we love, it's really hard to just I think for a lot of people to just say, okay, this is my third favorite movie ever. This is my second favorite movie ever. So I just kind of want to leave it a little broader than that. So Eric, in your pantheon of favorite movies, unless you know where this movie truly does rank, don't feel pressured to have to assign it a number. Where in your pantheon is this? Is this a top 20 movie for you? Top 10? Top 3? I mean, where do you kind of see Goodfellas landing?
I don't know if I could ever put a number on really any movie. The security questions for your password reset for everything, it's like, what's your favorite this? And it's like, well, it kind of depends what kind of day I'm having, like what my favorite, it's like,
right.
What's your favorite movie? I've just never had one. I've had a plethora of favorite movies. And so this is one of those. This is Hall of Fame. I mean, it's legendary, not just for the nostalgia, because that's probably one of the more important driving factors. This is my first like one parent sanctioned rated R movie. So like it's always gonna carry more weight than maybe another one. So I think that's a factor, and nostalgia is such an important part of memory and how we feel about things, and it's there. So, but if I had never seen this before and I watched it for the very first time yesterday, it would still make the Hall of Fame for me, I think. I mean, as much as I can say that to try to separate my memory, but it's definitely top 20. I mean, there's no doubt about that, and I would say that it's probably a favorite to make the top 10. It's definitely. I mean, I would recite this movie so often as far as quotes go. It's so many different scenes and everything, but I would heavily recommend this to anybody who would listen to me, and it would be one of my goats. It's one of the greatest of all time. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I would be comfortable saying top 10.
Okay. So I was recently asked on the Basement Binge about a month ago. We recorded an episode on the first Fast and Furious movie. And on that show, Harrison asked, because it was the first time I had appeared on that show. Matt's been on with him a couple times, but one of the things he likes to ask, just to give viewers an idea or listeners an idea of who a person is just what's your favorite movie? And like you, Eric, it's hard for me to just narrow it down. And I think for a lot of people, it's hard for them when it comes to entertainment media, especially movies. I think it's really hard to just hammer out a true top 10 list. So to try to come up with one, I just simply can't do, because I have kind of a three-way tie for first because of that emotional investment. So to me, I have a three-way tie at first place of Avengers Endgame, The Big Lebowski, and Goodfellas. So I can confidently tell you in my pantheon, it's top 3 because it's in a three-way tie for first place for me. Because I can't separate one of those films for the other in terms of what it means to me.
What's better, because you can have a favorite comedy and a favorite drama and a favorite action,
right?
And they're not all not one of them brings something to the table that the other one doesn't. And so, I mean, I'm not dismissing people who actually have like a legitimate, this is my favorite movie of all time.
Oh, sure.
Like, I'm actually kind of jealous because I can't do it. You've got an answer to your security question. I don't have that. I have to pick my first grade teacher, because that's like a factual thing. It's not an opinion. It's not subjective. I can't, have a different feeling about it on Monday versus on Friday, so I'm sort of jealous of that, but I get what you're saying. And, that's why I struggle with putting numbers on any of it, because man, if I were to like write down a list, I would be able to write you a list of like must see movies. And I think that's where my, pantheon ratings come from
there's 11 Star Wars movies. I mean, where do you start throwing those out? When you're making a top 20, there's 3 Indiana Jones movies that we acknowledge the existence of. There's 3 Lord of the Rings movies.
Yes.
there's 3 Matrix movies. Yeah. There's 3 Matrix movies. Like, when you start throwing that out there and you realize you got to hammer out a top 10 or a top 20 with the existence of those films, and the MCU has 24 films now. Like, go ahead, start throwing those out.
I can't even agree with myself. So how am I supposed to agree with anybody else? Because, like, again, it really depends on what have I seen more recently. Because, Rogue One, we talked about this before, but Star Wars, like, it depends on what I've seen. Like, maybe one day Rogue One's going to be my favorite. Maybe Empire's going to be my favorite one day. Like, it just, it all depends. And so that's where I'm glad we don't have to put a number on it. I do enjoy.
I knew that we were never going to be able to do that.
Yeah, I do enjoy that we can put a sort of a bookend, from this number to this number. That is more suitable for me.
Which, by the way, if the program director here at Matt Goes to the Movies allows us to continue doing shows, if we end up doing 15 shows and you say all 15 of them are in your top 10, that's also okay too, because because the math doesn't work out
ever.
Yeah, the math doesn't work out. If film shouldn't. This is going to sound crazy because we're doing a recap show on a network about movie recaps. Film shouldn't really be taken that seriously, and I mean that, and I don't. And I guess if I have to try to explain that, you should not have to feel like you have to explain yourself for why you like the things you like.
But you don't have to defend yourself.
No,
if you like a thing,
unless you like The Last Jedi. If you like The Last Jedi, then you're dead to me, and I just can't understand you.
But as far as art goes, especially film, television, video games, the things I love the most, you don't have to defend. Like, if you like a thing, you like a thing. It is what it is, man. It out. Do what you want.
Yeah. So we're going to move into the last segment here. Rob's reviews, recommendations. Eric, what are you currently watching, reading, or playing that you would recommend to listeners?
Man,
it could be related to Goodfellas, or it could be something different.
It's not. This really, you're going to learn, I guess, this about me the more you listen to me talk. But I love nostalgia. I love my childhood. I loved how things made me feel in the 90s. So currently I'm playing. I play like across multiple platforms, so it depends on what room I'm in and what day of the week it is. But for the most part, I'm playing the crap out of my Super NES Classic Final Fantasy III US version. It's Final Fantasy VI for everybody else. Lots of hours devoted to that game.
Oh yeah.
If I'm down in my living room, I'm playing Dragon Age Origins. It's like my 5th to 12th time playing that one. Sorry. A lot of throwbacks. Summertime is good for throwbacks for me. That's always been kind of my trend. In the summer, I tend to play things that are really, really old, replay things. Knights of the Old Republic, I'm also doing on my phone when I have a moment to game on my phone. I'm watching Burn Notice start to finish for about the 14th time. Just finished Bosch on Amazon Prime. Fantastic. Titus Welliver is pretty much a badass and very believable. So that's an excellent show. Check it out if you haven't.
Cool. I'm going to go ahead and recommend Wise Guys. I just finished reading it, and I would definitely recommend it, especially if you've listened to this. I don't feel like there's anything, by listening to us talk about the book and the differences between the book that the film is based on, that you're going to not still enjoy. You're still going to definitely enjoy the extra details and things like that. Playing, like I said, I'm right in the middle of Red Dead Redemption 2, and it's just kind of fun how much there's a lot of parallels and crossovers. So we're pretty much right at the end here. So I want to just thank everybody for listening. If this is the second time you've listened to the extended podcast universe for Rob's Reviews, I want to thank you for coming back. If this is the first time you've actually listened to something on the Matt Goes to the Movies channel, I want to definitely invite you to check out the rest of it and email the show too. That email address again is mgttmpodcast@gmail.com. So it's just the first initials of Matt Goes to the Movies podcast@gmail.com. You can definitely check that out in the notes that Matt's going to put up for the show. Special request, if you are a member of the growing international listener community to the Matt Goes to the Movies show, we definitely want to hear from you. Absolutely. Please hit us up on social media, all the different places I mentioned before. You can definitely check out previous episodes if you haven't already. Eric and I did one on Fight Club that was a lot of fun to do, so go back and check that out if you haven't already. Matt and I finished up recaps for Loki. We've done all the other MCU shows on Disney+. Matt recently also published episodes on The Dark Knight, Equilibrium, which is a hidden gem. If you haven't seen Equilibrium, please go see that movie. It's, rent it, buy it, whatever you got to do. It's worth it. And then make sure you check out Matt's recap. I also did Spiral from A Book of Saw. And then also, friend of the show, Harrison from the Basement Binge. His show will definitely be listed in the show notes as well. I was able to jump on with him and Matt to do the first and third Fast and Furious movie, and Matt did the entire Fast saga with him. So make sure you check that out. He also released an episode recently on a special Dune event he attended that sounds pretty cool. And just listening to him break that down has got me much more hyped for Dune than I was previously. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. Both shows have some great stuff coming up. They've got reviews of iRobot coming, which I'm looking forward to listening to. And then Snake Eyes on Basement Binge. And then Harrison's also told me he's going to do La La Land, which I think that should be kind of fun. It'll be a little bit different than what he's normally covering. While you're at it, leave a review on podchaser.com. It's linked in the show notes. It's a great way. It's kind of like the IMDb for podcasts. It's a great way for people to know what's a good show to listen to and what they should be checking out. And it also gives those of us creating the content some great feedback about what you like. Eric, we just spent 2 hours talking about Goodfellas, and we didn't rat on our friends. We didn't rat on our friends, but we weren't able to keep our mouths shut about the wise guys of Goodfellas. So thanks again for joining me.
I can never keep my mouth shut once I've had some bourbon. So, that's just going to be what it is.
So once again, listeners, thank you so much for joining us. Please, like I said, interact with the show, leave feedback, and be sure to subscribe so that the next time that we're on, it'll be right on your phone. You won't have to go searching for it, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much.